of more than 50 countries. So we are making progress in enhancing this initiative. And India is a country that's standing right in the midway of this line. And we are looking forward to India's participation. And actually, India has already taken part in building the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank, in building the economic corridor of BCIM, Burma, China, India, and Bangladesh. And as His Excellency Prime Minister said in his inaugural video message to the ceremony of Visit India project in China, that China and India over 1,000 years has built inseparable bonds. When the ancient Chinese monk Xuanzang went to India and in searching the Buddhist sculpture, he had been in my hometown, Gujarat.
Ambassador, you need to wind up, please.
Okay. And also, when he came back, he had gone to Xi'an, the hometown of President Xi Jinping, Chinese president. So what I want to say is that we have every reason to cooperate. We have, tremendous potentials to tap into. So we need to join hands and make our world more safer and more prosperous. Thank you.
High Commissioner Suckling, you do want to speak.
Quickly, because you're going to ask me nasty questions afterwards. It is India's moment. I think that's perfectly obvious looking around the world. Looking at the latest edition of The Economist, yet again, it's doing its 6 monthly thing. It now has a flying elephant on the front cover as opposed to a hobbled one. Seems to do that every 6 months, but I think the trajectory will keep going up from now on. Arun Puri, thank you for the invitation for today. You asked me to focus on one big issue. I think I'll focus on something that I think illustrates that shift occurring with India. The fact that it's India's moment, it's an example. I think it encapsulates a big global shift that's occurring in the world. When Prime Minister Modi spoke to our Parliament in November, he said something that was very memorable. He said that for too long Australia had been on the periphery of India's vision, and from now on it should be at the centre of India's thoughts, that in any area of national priority for India, he saw Australia as a major partner. When President Obama was here, he made something that caught my eye. He said something that caught my ear, that he said, we used to look to the United States through the west across the Atlantic. Now I look east and see the western side of the United States lapping upon the Pacific Ocean, and I know that we are two great countries in a great and dynamic region, and we need to work together to secure prosperity and stability in this most dynamic region of the world. And I think those two comments do encapsulate a very significant shift that's occurring globally, and that is that the centre of economic and strategic gravity is shifting to the Indo-Pacific. We use the term Indo-Pacific. The Ambassador mentioned the agreement that was done on the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Oceans. We think there's an emerging arc between the Pacific Oceans and the Indian Oceans, with India right at the centre of that. The term returns India to Asia's strategic mix, and it describes a set of interdependencies, particularly related to energy, coming out of the Middle East, across the top of the Indian Ocean, through the Malacca Straits and the South China Seas to North Asia. So there's an interdependent strategic hemisphere developing, with India right at the centre of that. Before 2050, 3 of the 4 largest economies will be in the Indo-Pacific. So the world order is changing. The strategic calculus is changing. Future decades will be shaped by what happens in this region. And it's not just the big countries like the United States, China, India, Japan. There's a whole lot of other countries in the region as well that will matter and are increasingly important. Indonesia, South Korea, Vietnam, for example. So these changes, this flux, throws up major challenges. How to continue to drive the region's remarkable prosperity that's propelled these changes. So these get to questions, very significant questions of economic reform and regional economic integration, which the US ambassador mentioned, and we're working in similar ways on an economic agenda, same with China connectivity in terms of integrating the world's most dynamic economic region. But it does also throw up big questions of national economic management and reform, which was a big theme of the G20 that we hosted last year, and obviously everyone in this audience knows what Mr. Modi is doing on the economic front in India. It throws up big questions of how to manage strategic competition in this dynamic region. There will and is already strategic competition, and how that's managed will matter. We just have to look at the example of the South China Sea and everything that's gone around that over the last 2 years to know what sort of competition that brings. It raises questions of what sort of architecture to build to promote habits of cooperation and not conflict. You asked how would we deal with these challenges, and what sort of mix do you do diplomatically to confront such enormous shifts and so many multifaceted problems. And I guess the answer is you have to have a multifaceted approach to how you deal with these sorts of challenges. And the bedrock from an Australian point of view will always be strong bilateral relations. That's also building partners, strengthening alliances, requiring all instruments of national power, military, economic and diplomatic. All of that will be fundamental to the sort of continued balancing that must occur to maintain stability and prosperity in what will be and what is the world's most dynamic region. But from our perspective, those sorts of efforts have to be complemented by regional initiatives. There's no bigger or more important initiative in our region, we think, than building better architecture to build habits of cooperation. Our region is characterized by a lot of states with increasing military power, spending a lot of money on their military projection, and doesn't have a history, our region, this region of the Indo-Pacific, of a lot of multilateral cooperation. So building those habits of cooperation, consultation is vital. For example, the East Asia Summit, in our view, which brings the key countries of the region together, it has a mandate to look at economic, political, security issues, to evolve an architecture that can be used to build those habits of cooperation we think is very important. And that has to be reinforced from our perspective at a multilateral level as well. And no more important example than that is making sure that we continue to strengthen and develop the global rules-based system that has operated so well for so many countries, and in fact has underpinned the remarkable growth of so many of the countries in the Indo-Pacific, including India. So multifaceted approach to how to deal with these challenges. From our perspective, we view India as a central part of this emerging Indo-Pacific region. It's a rising power, and we see India is committed to fulfilling its potential under the Modi government. So India will play an increasingly important and strong, influential leading role, as Ambassador Steiner has mentioned. Just two last things to finish off on. What was my vision I was asked for 2020? I think increasing prosperity, given everything that's gone on in this region, but amidst a myriad of challenges, amidst an increasing imperative for more coordination, cooperation and integration, and that's going to require a lot of diplomacy and a lot of deft work over many decades, needing a big effort. So what was my target, the final question, in terms of what do I want to see, what would Australia like to see in 2020? I think fundamentally, if you're seeing a global dynamic change, if you're seeing the changing weights of the world occurring, then global institutions need to change to better reflect contemporary realities. And from our perspective, I think that it's time that countries like India, countries like China had more weight at the global table, as Ambassador Steiner was mentioning, that a country like India is given a much stronger voice at the global table of governance. We felt that very strongly in terms of the creation of the G20 at the leaders level. It's time that countries beyond the old order stepped up to a new order, but still within the context of an international global rules-based system that benefits everybody. So to see those weights change, including in the UN over the next few years, would be a good thing, and it's a necessary thing. Thank you.
Mr. James.
I want to start by paying tribute to Mahatma Gandhi. This morning in London, my Prime Minister David Cameron and Arun Jaitley will unveil a new statue of that great man in Parliament Square. It's a historic moment. It's probably, thank you. It's probably an overdue moment, but today the United Kingdom finally and fully honours the man who fought and beat the British Empire and led India to independence. Gandhiji was once asked what he thought about British civilization, and he replied that he thought it would be a good idea. I like to think that he's smiling on us today. Now, British High Commissioners don't usually quote Leon Trotsky. It's discouraged in our diplomatic service. But Trotsky did say one thing which is both powerful and true. He said, "You may not be interested in war, but war is interested in you." And I think in 2015, war is interested in us. Global terrorism is one of the biggest threats we all face. Unconventional warfare conducted by conventional nation states also threatens our interests. You can see that in Ukraine right now with an attempt to change an international border by force. Nor are all the threats that we face military in nature. Climate change, global epidemics, those can kill many more people than terrorists or hot war. But a point I want to make to you this morning is that while it is true that the world looks more dangerous now than it did 20 years ago, the big fact about the 21st century is that things are getting better. We humans are healthier than we've ever been before. We live longer. Women have rights. Average incomes are 3 times higher than they were 50 years ago. Most of us are free today to choose what government we have, what we wear, who we work for, who we marry, whether we have children. We know more things today than we have ever known, and more people know them. In sum, life in 2015 is good. We are richer, we're healthier, we're taller, we're cleverer, we're longer lived, we're more knowledgeable, we're safer and we're freer than we have ever been before. Now, what is India's role in that complex world? I'll sum it up in one word: indispensable. India is, or can be, part of the solution to every major challenge that the world faces. Terrorism, India and all the countries here on this dais face many of the same threats. Together we can beat them. Instability, the very fact that India is such a stable country promotes stability in a potentially turbulent region. Prosperity, a growing Indian economy will unlock and help drive world prosperity. Climate change, Indian leadership at Paris at the end of this year can help deliver a global deal. Conflict, India's leading role in UN peacekeeping operations is helping keeping the world safe. Knowledge, India has some world-beating scientists and innovators. There is no problem I'm confident that Indian scientists and innovators cannot find a solution to. In sum, a strong India active in the world is in everyone's interests. That's why the UK supports Prime Minister Modi's efforts to transform this great country. That's why my country supports India's bid to become a permanent member of the UN Security Council. And that's why a flourishing India will greatly enhance the prospects for the 21st century world. Thank you.
Ambassador Takeshi.
Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me to this session. This is meant to be a conclave, but I hope we can be released even if we don't reach any consensus. And you really have set a very ambitious agenda. So as for the big issues affecting the world, I just would like to mention one from our perspective. That's energy, environment, including climate change and disasters. As you know, Japan was struck by the great East Japan earthquake exactly 4 years ago. And also, as this region is very often hit by big disasters. And by the way, just today, in Sendai City, that is one of the worst hit cities in the region, a big UN conference on disaster risk reduction is going on. And also, I'd like to remind you that at the time of the disaster, India not just donated fund and relief goods, but also dispatched a rescue team. And also, all the countries represented here today extended a very valuable helping hand. So I just would like to take this opportunity to thank everyone for your help. Thank you very much. Now, let me go straight to our views and expectations on India. Of course, our expectations, particularly after the change in government, are very high. According to a survey regularly conducted among Japanese companies, India has become, for the first time, the most promising investment destination for the next 3 years. And the 90% of them mention the policy of the new government as the reason. And in terms of the number of Japanese companies, it has been expanding very fast. Actually, it has doubled in the past 5 years, and it is now above 1,200. When Prime Minister Modi visited Japan last September, we agreed on the target to double Japan's FDI to India and also the number of Japanese companies in India. So we are keen to make positive contributions to Make in India, Clean India, and Digital India, as well as the corridors and the Diamond Quadrilateral. In some sense, we'd like to see some synergy between Abenomics and Modinomics. At the same time, I have to say that in order to make sure that this improved atmosphere and the surge of interest can actually ignite the real trade and investment, the improvement of business environment plays a key role. It is encouraging that Prime Minister Modi himself has been stressing the importance of ease of doing business. And we really hope that those statements, campaigns, and initiatives will be implemented and translated into ground realities as soon as possible. And on the foreign policy front, of course, we support the Act East enthusiastically. And in the bilateral context, we'd like to strengthen our cooperation to improve the connectivity, first within this region, and second, between this region and the ASEAN and the Asia Pacific. And also we'd like to promote cooperation on maritime security, and we also hope that India will be even more active in Indo-Pacific regional frameworks, such as East Asia Summit and RCEP, Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership. And since I was personally involved in the TPP negotiations, I wonder when India will be seriously interested in TPP.
Translated into reality, I actually believe that as we have this enormous potential here in India, and that's everywhere, that's in the big cities, the small cities, and that's also on the countryside. I think empowerment, which means, of course, a certain withdrawal of government, is key. And I think the main thing is to trust the creativity of the Indians and to give them this space which they need, that they can develop their potential. And then, I mean, here is the Chinese colleague. I was posted in Geneva. I was posted in New York. New York was 89 something. China, with all due respect, at that time, had a very reserved, reduced role also in the Security Council. If you look at the position, the activation of the Chinese position, you can ask yourself what happened. I think what has happened is that China has gained a different role. And how has it gained this different role? It has to do something with the inner flourishment. So I think this whole question, how do we get to the high table, is mainly an issue on how you address your inner situation. All the rest comes from that. Let me just say a last point on that. Of course, sitting on the high table is not for free. It requests also a global responsibility and a mindset for a global responsibility. You cannot sit on the high table just thinking about yourself. You have to have this global approach, so it's not for free, but I think It's clear, and all the ambassadors here said it, we need India on this high table because of the reasons we all have mentioned.
You spoke about the need for a mindset that is reflective of your right to sit on the global high table. So James, what sort of mindset was revealed by the Modi government when the Nirbhay documentary made by the BBC was banned in this country without anyone even seeing it in government? How did that go down with the British people, with your government and your media?
Well, 2 points, Karen. First, as everyone will know, the BBC is independent of the British government. We don't control the BBC. It makes its own decisions. But secondly, no one is neutral about rape. Rape and violence against women are terrible things. They're a problem in my country, in India. They're a problem in every country in the world. My government is very active in supporting all of those who fight against violence against women. And we applaud the government of India and all those in India who are fighting against violence against women.
High Commissioner Patel, Canada is a great defender of amnesty. Your voice is always raised as a country in support of amnesty when others are critical of what amnesty is doing. How did your government respond to the fact that an Indian citizen, Priya Pillai, was denied permission to leave her own country, to go to Britain and speak to British MPs about her concerns about a mining operation in this country? I know that the High Court has recently turned down exactly what the government did, but how did that initial action by the Modi government get received by your government in Canada?
Well, I think, as some of my colleagues have pointed out, India's role in the world is very significant, and with that leadership comes a level of responsibility. And we will engage with India on a range of issues, including when it comes to individual situations that warrant some discussion around demonstrating that leadership on the world stage. And I think engagement on these complicated and some other issues that have come up in the discussion today is a demonstration of that responsibility to lead. And on this particular issue, it's a good example where we will continue to use that and others as examples of engagement. India is changing in a way that it will play a leadership role, is now, and will continue to for many, many years to come. And that change entails different perspectives. It's okay to agree, to disagree, coming from different perspectives, but engagement over time will see a greater alignment and convergence of perspectives that will align the various, whether it's this or other topics, across the world along the lines of that leadership.
Ambassador Verma, President Obama's town hall speech at City Fort got a lot of praise, but it also stirred a certain amount of controversy. The comments that he made about the need for India to respect all religions and not to be splintered along lines of religious faith were then echoed by him a week or so later at the prayer breakfast. If I recall correctly, he said it at least twice. I've asked you this before, and I'm asking you again. Was there a message there for the Modi government?
Maybe I can give you the same answer I gave you before. No, I would encourage, if all of you have had a chance to see the full Siri Fort speech or to read it, I would encourage you to read it. I actually read it again this morning thinking that this question might come up. I would say a few things. I would say it is one of the historic speeches that the President has given. It was a compelling speech. It is a speech in two parts. The first part is about the U.S.-India partnership and all the areas of our cooperation and the big trajectory we were on, as I've talked about. The second part is about our shared values and our universal values that we stand up for. It is also very much a speech about American challenges, the President's challenges in that regard.